All right, totally fixed my problems here. See that my mic's lighting up, so this is all good now. Sorry for starting a little late. My name is Renee Gittins, and I'm going to be talking today on building and managing your team. This is a good talk for aspiring studio leads, especially indie developers. However, it contains a lot of important information if you're working on a team at all. Sorry about this, startling people. So let's start off with talking a bit about who I am and so why I'm giving this talk. Um, I'm the CEO and creative director of the Seattle-based indie studio Stumbling Cat. We're working on a game called Potions of Curious Tale, and we actually just got successfully kickstarted 2 months ago. So we brought in $65,000 through that, and of course, we're really excited and happy to be able to continue with development. Um, I'm also a mentor and advisor at Foundry 10, which is an organization that teaches students about, well, basically whatever they want to learn. So I lead the game development and programming teams. And so my work there is basically leading teams of high school students in game development. I also sit on the IGDA Seattle chapter board. So I organize events for game developers in Seattle area. And previously, I've been a producer at Fixer Studios, another indie studio, and I worked as a lead in the biotech industry prior to getting into games, um, both on the programming side and actually on the hardware side as well. So I guess it's time to build a team, right? Well, or is it? There's a lot of questions you need to ask yourself before you start building a team. You need to know if you're ready to build one. And the questions that I like going over is just saying the VAC questions, VAC, because you need to have a vision for the game, what the game will be, what game you're trying to make. Prototyping is really important. I think that prototyping before you start building your team is important. And even if you don't have programming abilities, you can prototype on paper. Just make sure that you have a vision that you're going to be leading this team on the path of. Action is the second one there. And what I mean by action is that you can take action immediately when you start building your team, that you have something for them to do. You're not just getting these people to come sit around and wait for you. And then finally, the last part is C, compensation. Before you start building your team, you need to think about how you want to compensate your team. And there's a lot of different ways you can compensate someone. We'll be going over that a bit later. So first of all, finding your team is, well, sort of the start to building it, right? And there's many different places that you can find people. Obviously, your friends. I know that a lot of indie teams actually start as friends who do a game jam together or have come together through similar interests. So your friends are a good place to start. Obviously, the downside of that is you might have more emotions related with these people than you would just normal associates. So associates are a good place to look, people that you've worked with in the past, people that you're familiar with professionally, and you might have a better idea of how they're going to work together with you. Finally, both your friends and your associates can give you recommendations. And recommendations are actually really great because you basically are getting someone that is good enough or has shown excellence in a way that other people would recommend them. So they're probably good to work with. And then if you can't find somebody through these methods, there's always, of course, the internet. And I've actually found a number of my team members online. The sites that I use for that have been the Reddit subreddit r/GameDevsClassifieds, the Unity forums. There's a particular forum where you can post on it, and then I've looked through DeviantArt and other places, depending on the type of person I'm looking for. Obviously, I'm not going to look for a programmer on DeviantArt, or I'm not going to look for a artist on Stack Overflow. But there are those more unique channels that you can search for particular team members in. So when you're looking for these members to join your team, there's some ideal teammate qualities that they can have. First and foremost is that they're a self-starter. And I know this is a term that's used all the time on job postings and things like that. People are looking for self-starters. And I think that's really important. And what I mean when I'm saying self-starter is someone who will identify what they need to get done and teach themselves the tools they need to get that done. So if I have a programmer, I want them to be able to find bugs and start fixing them. And if they run into something that needs new technology, be able to research and implement that new technology. Self-starters are really important, but what's also important is that your teammates accept criticism well. You want to find someone who can accept criticism because nobody's going to make things perfectly. And there will have to be feedback, and you'll have to give them feedback, and they'll have to be able to take that and improve and reiterate. Games and game development is really all about iteration. So you need to be able to have a team that will accept criticism well, both from you and from other sources. If you ever go out and demo a game, you're going to be having feedback from the general public, criticism from the general public, whether or not you want it. And so being able to handle that with grace is extremely important. Just as they must be able to provide feedback or accept feedback, they should be able to provide feedback. You don't want to have to tell everyone on your team the exact thing that they need to do. You want your team to be able to give feedback to each other. I have multiple artists on my team, and while I can give art feedback, giving each other art feedback is probably much more valuable for them because that's their area of expertise. And in order for them to be able to provide feedback with each other, they need to be compatible. Some people can be there's a lot of people who are very talented but don't work well together because they just have different personalities or there's some other conflict. And so making sure that someone's compatible with your team before bringing them on is important so that your team works well. Unfortunately, I had an incident once where one of my good friends was very talented in his area of expertise, and I knew that his personality was a bit different from the rest of my team. And when I brought him on, it caused such a conflict that we actually lost about a week or two of work because there was so much damage caused by basically this incompatibility. And that's an unfortunate circumstance, but now it's something that I make sure I look for. And then finally, of course, you want to find a teammate who's competent at what you're asking them to do. So if you're looking for an artist, you probably want them to have done art before. However, being a self-starter is more important than being competent because game development and technology changes so quickly. You need someone who can change and learn with that technology without you having to hold their hand through it. Having them be competent is great, but having them be able to learn and continue to be competent is even better. So now that hopefully you've been able to find teammates, that are good self-starters and accept criticism well and provide feedback, you need to think about, compensation for them. A lot of different companies do different types of compensation. Obviously, AAA studios go more towards the salary side of things, but for smaller studios and startups, that's a bit difficult to find the funds for that. And so alternative forms of compensation are often required. So the first type of compensation is sharing ownership of your company with the people that you bring on your team. Now, this is really great for very close friends who are very invested and are certain on the project, but is trickier for people who might only temporarily be on the project or on the project or on a single project instead of continuing with the company. So, ownership is kind of easy to divide, but it's hard if you plan to do multiple projects, making sure that it is going to be distributed fairly. Another type of sort of ownership stuff is profit sharing. So you can share a percentage of the game's profits as compensation. So you can say, if you come do the art for me, you'll get 15% of all of our profits for the rest of this, for this game, for the rest of eternity. You can put caps on profit sharing. So if you make the next Minecraft and you bring somebody on for a 5% share for 2 weeks of work, you're not giving them millions of dollars just because you happen to make a hit. you know, that's something you'll have to work out with the people that you're bringing onto your team if there's going to be a cap to the profit sharing. And then finally, of course, the simple type of compensation is just straight up payment. And this can be payment by hour, this can be sort of a salary payment plan, or it can even be by asset. So if you want to hire someone to make a sprite sheet, then you can pay them just for that sprite sheet. And then if you need them for more sprite sheets, you pay them for each sprite sheet that they come up with. Experience, portfolio building, and exposure are not forms of compensation. Don't let anyone tell you they're forms of compensation, and please don't try to compensate anyone by saying that the exposure they'll get through your game is the most valuable thing that they're going to get in return, because that is not how the world should work. So, with your team built and all properly compensated, managing your team is, well, sort of the next challenge. There are different types of management styles, and management styles can be modified and adapted to fit your team. Not everyone works well under the same styles, so sometimes you're going to have to work them around a bit to get them to fit your team and your project. And there are a lot of books out there that say, like, very strictly, this is exactly how you should do Agile, or this is exactly how Scrum works. And while those are valuable resources, I think that there's no letter of the law to managing a team. And sort of modifying how you manage your team to best fit them is going to get the best results and have the happiest and most productive team. So don't be afraid to change what doesn't work. I wouldn't change things all the time on your team so you're never set. But if you find something that's not working in management, go ahead and modify it. So let's talk about some of these different management styles. The first style that's really common, especially in the past and in sort of more manufacturing, is the waterfall style. So you plan out sequential phases and deliverables. So you go through your requirements, and then you go through the design, and then you go through implementation, and then you do testing and verification, and then to maintenance. And then obviously this can be broke down into sub tasks of what that requires. The waterfall structure commonly uses a work breakdown structure, which can be either top down or bottom up. So if you're making a game and you're doing top down, you're saying, okay, I have a game and I need a player character. And then below the player character, I need the player character to have a controller, and I need them to have a model, and I need them to have voice lines. And you break it down until you get all of the little bits of your game that are required. And then you figure out how those are going to be made and put them in a calendar for management of your team. And so you know when your milestones are going to be and what needs to get done at a certain time. And this chart, this calendar, is commonly called a Gantt chart. And it's really a common management tool. The problem with the waterfall structure is that it is extremely rigid. And game development, since it requires often so many iterations, and you run into problems where maybe something's not as fun as you intended, or maybe you guys have a really great idea that you want to add, it's harder to work this into a Gantt chart and a work breakdown structure, because you're supposed to pre-plan everything, and that just is hard to do for software. So another system that is a little rigid as well is the Kanban system. If any of you are familiar with it's Trello, you have the tasks on basically post-it notes, and you can put them into different categories and switch them around and assign them to people. This is very also commonly used in sort of the mechanical manufacturing world, but it's also used in network operations centers. I know that Riot uses a Kanban system for managing their network operations centers, and it just allows you to quickly visually show what tasks are needing to be done and what state they're in. So you have your tasks and you put them under different states, and you can move them around fairly easily. The problem with the Kanban system is it requires a lot of overhead, because you have these people that need to move these tasks around as they work on them and hand them off to each other. So it requires your team to be doing a lot of self-management, or at least showing what they're doing constantly, which can be distracting when you have a small team, and difficult to manage, especially if you don't have a physical office where you literally have this Kanban system on the board. As I said, there are different online tools available where you can run a Kanban system, but they do require people logging into them versus wall. So probably the most commonly used system in software, and certainly in games right now, is Agile. And Agile is a system built around reoccurring collaboration within and across teams. So you'll normally have a Scrum system where you have a Scrum master, and you'll do things called stand-ups. And in a stand-up, everyone expresses any blockers they have, which are things that are preventing them from doing their work. They'll express what they've gotten done and what they're going to be doing coming up. And this allows the whole team to see where everyone's at and what the going forward they're going to be doing for the next week, or whatever the Scrum period is. And it allows for team leaders to easily identify blockers and make sure that those are being removed, that they're being attacked. So another benefit of the agile system is, well, in its name, it's very agile. Since you're meeting and planning sort of each week as the week starts, in mind with the milestones, it allows for the team to be much more flexible. And if there are changes or blockers that upset the schedule, it's very apparent, and the team can be modified, and their tasks can be modified to get the problem solved and stay on the milestone timeline. So with these different management styles, it helps to build a routine. What I really like about having a routine, and especially with Agile, is it helps maintain project momentum. When your team is checking in, once a week, twice a week, maybe even every day, it always feels like you have to decide what you've done and what you're going to do next, and it helps the team move forward even when times are really tough, even when you're working long weeks. It helps keep sort of the zombies on the roll forward. It also helps follow timelines and milestones. Since you have a routine, it gives you a better chance to do time estimates, because if you're checking in once a week, you'll know about how much work your team can get done in a week normally, and able to adjust any of your time estimates or milestones for that. There's also a lot of tools that are very beneficial for managing your team, but you should consider what your team needs, because having tools that are unnecessary can provide unnecessary overhead, can create unnecessary overhead, and create distractions as well. Slack is a tool that I absolutely love. It's really good for communication sharing and everything like that. It takes care of a lot of different tasks, and you can integrate other tools into it as well, so people can get notifications when those things change. However, depending on the culture built around Slack, Slack can turn into an off-topic conversation generator, and that can be very distracting for your team, especially for team members who might need to get into their own zone. When you're looking at different tools, obviously you should be looking at the costs and benefits to them. And I think it's good to compare the familiarity of a tool versus its efficiency. So it's beneficial to have people who are to have tools that people are very familiar with. And sometimes a tool that's more efficient overall might end up being less efficient, just because it takes team members a new time, or a time to warm up to it as a new tool. So consider the onboarding process of sorts of new tools to make sure that you're not creating unnecessary overhead when integrating them. So let's talk about some tools. Communication tools, as I mentioned, Slack And you also have, email tools. You need to decide if you're going to be using people's personal emails or if you're going to be creating company emails for everyone, and sort of the method of using those. Voice communication is really helpful. Both Skype, Google Hangouts, and of course Discord are really good voice communication platforms. And then other just general platforms that are commonly used are Slack, HipChat, and Campfire. Now, with these communication tools, it is important to have defined channels for these communications. You don't want to try to be talking across a bunch of different tools at once. I don't want to be messaging my team, direct messaging them on Twitter and on Facebook and on Slack and emailing them. I want them to look for a particular channel and not have to be distracted in checking all these different channels of communication for messages from me. I want them to know where they can communicate through or what they communicate through. Um, so another type of tool that is really important is a task tracking tool. So task tracking tools are great because they provide clear and quick communication, and they might contain a lot of information you'd send in an email, but they take less time. Another benefit of task tracking tools is you can quickly triage different bugs and problems, different tasks. And triaging is when you take something and basically assign the importance of it. So if it's blocking other people, that would be the most critical. It'd be a blocking task, and everyone would know right away, oh, this is a blocking task. I should hack this one first. And then you can have, how severe, how important the tasks are. So you can have like really important, semi-important, not important. Maybe you can ship without it. And just being able to quickly glance at the tasks remaining and that your team can glance at them and know how important they are really helps the team focused on moving the game forward and attacking those most important tasks. So I already mentioned Trello as one. Bitbucket has its own task tracking now. Jira also has task tracking. And I believe Asana is a commonly used task tracking tool. So there is one more tool that I'd like to talk about. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's a project management tool. In fact, it isn't a project management tool. But it is a tool that is necessary for any software project, and that's source control or version control. Git is probably the most commonly used source control, but there's Perforce and other types of source control as well. And so for those of you who don't know what source control is a method of saving your project and the changes of it going forward so that it can be easily shared, and at any point in time you can easily go back to one of those changes, remove it, modify it, or just take the project in a different direction. It's also really good for bug fixing because if you unintentionally add a bug in the past and you're not sure where it is, you can easily roll back your project to different points in time to see where that bug was created. And so that really helps in finding those difficult to track down bugs. So, obviously these tools are really beneficial for managing interactions with your team, but they don't cover everything. So you need to consider how you're interacting with your team overall. It really helps when you're interacting with your team and talking with them to have well-defined goals. If people don't know what they're working on or what the end goal is, they might get distracted, they might feel unmotivated, and they might just not really know what to do. So having well-defined goals, telling people specific tasks, and telling them specific results that you want really helps in allowing your team to do their job. It also helps to have an established decision structure. And what I mean by that is, while you're developing a game, there's a lot of decisions that are going to have to be made sort of on the fly. And having a decision structure established allows for emotions to be sort of taken out of the issue. So if you say, hey, I'm the team leader, I'm going to make all final decisions, that's fine. Or you can say, hey, we're going to make any decision that comes up democratically, so we're all going to vote. Or any art decision is going to be made by this person who's now the art lead. And all of those are fine just structures, but if you change them when a problem comes up, then people can feel hurt about that. So establishing a decision structure ahead of time will save you a lot of pain when it needs to be used. Providing honest feedback is also very important. As I said, game development is all about iterations. So honest feedback is super important to give. And giving a platform for all voices, for people to bring up um, the difficulties and that they have, and to make sure that even your shy members of your team have a chance to speak up and talk about their concerns. But the ultimate key to leading a good team is to be nice. Don't be a jerk. Tensions run high. Sometimes you're working really hard and it's just, it's hard to not get upset sometimes, but especially as a team leader, you have to make sure that everyone is always being treated fairly and nicely, no matter how irritated you could be, and making sure that everyone treats each other nicely as well. So, as a brief overview, build a team when you're ready to build a team, and recruit teammates who will grow with the project. Find and provide appropriate compensation. No exposure counting as compensation. And establish tools and routine, but be flexible. And of course, be nice. Cool. So I have time to stick around for any questions if you guys have any. I know I've just been sort of blathering at you. I hope you really enjoyed the talk, so thank you. All right. Well, I'm really glad that you enjoyed the talk. Oh, and of course, let me put my Twitter in here. It's at RikuCat. You're welcome to follow me, and if you come up with any questions later, you can just tweet at me, and I can tackle those in 140 characters. Um, so previously, I have posted online, like just jobs, and then the potential hires approached me through those. However, if I were to contact somebody that I was interested in working on my team, I would try to send them basically an email or a direct message of similar type, explaining what my project was, why I'd like them on the team, what of their work I liked, and uh, what I would want them to do on the team as well. Question. Whoops. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I hope you all stick around for the future talks. Please enjoy the Power Up Digital Games Conference.